A day after the 2+2 meet concluded between India and the United States, a lot of interesting aspects have come to the fore on how exactly India will be navigating the time to come. As the United States has reiterated its partnership with India, its goal of shared values, there is also a clear message that this much and not more. I'm talking about India's move to import Russian crude, even as the world and a lot of the Western world is not importing Russian crude, and the sanctions that seem to be coming on Russia because of it. The bone of contention behind the scenes seems to be remaining whether India will create an alternate payment mechanism to the SWIFT payment from which Russia has pretty much been kicked out by exchanging rubles for rupee and paying for Russian crude. Now, in this context, a very interesting response came in from External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar at the news conference after the 2+2 dialogue. The question was posed by a journalist who asked about why India wanted to increase its import of Russian crude if we don't really need it, and seemed to allude to the fact that India has not really taken as vocal a position to the world's eye against Russia's atrocities in Ukraine. Let's begin by listening in to the response which came in from the External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar.
First of all, thank you for the advice and suggestions in your question. I prefer to do it my way and articulate it my way. Now, as Secretary Blinken has pointed out, we have made a number of statements which outline our position in the UN, in our parliament, and in other forums. And briefly, what those positions state is that we are against the conflict, we are for dialogue and diplomacy, we are for urgent cessation of violence, and we are prepared to contribute in whatever way to these objectives. I noticed you refer to oil purchases. If you are looking at energy purchases from Russia, I would suggest that your attention should be focused on Europe, which probably we do buy some energy which is necessary for our energy security. But I suspect, looking at the figures, probably our total purchases for the month would be less than what Europe does in an afternoon. So you might want to think about it.
And now to speak on this, I'm joined by former Ambassador Vishnu Prakash. I'm also speaking with Chidanand Rajghatta, the US correspondent for the Times of India. Great to speak to both of you on the show, and thank you so much. Chidanand, let me begin with asking you what the focus and the highlight has been in the United States.
The same kind of intensity and coverage as it does in India. I think people are more focused on the shooting in New York this morning. But there's been considerable interest, much more than usual, simply because of the Russia-Ukraine situation. And to me, the predominant story here is the ability of two countries to live with differences. What we saw over the last 24 to 48 hours is, each side sticking to their narrative or their version of how they see things. I called it, a diplomatic version of irresistible force meeting an immovable object. The United States will not give up trying to coax India out of what they think is the close ties with Russia. And India will not give in. It asserted, and yesterday at the press conference after the 2+2, Foreign Minister Jaishankar was very categorical in asserting that India will, stick by its self-interest. The fact is, the narrative in the US that somehow India is very much aligned with Moscow or endorses Russia's invasion of Ukraine is totally wrong. It may not condemn Russia outright, but India has been fairly critical simply by repeatedly referring to the territorial integrity of countries. That itself is an implicit criticism of Russia. And then there are two pieces. One is the energy piece. The other is the defense piece. And with the energy piece, there was this remarkable exchange when a journalist pressed Jaishankar on why India is still importing energy, from Russia. He very artfully pointed out that all of India's import of Russian energy in a month is what Europe imports in a day or in an afternoon. I thought that was very smart, and it was a very subtle smackdown, because the fact is India not only imports very small amount of energy from Russia, even if it ramps up. India imports a lot more from the United States, actually. And also, by way, in the largest sense of trade between the two countries, Russia is a relatively minor trading partner of India compared to the United States. We're now topping 150 billion in
Right.
bilateral trade between US and India.
No, so the hypocrisy has been apparent for a while, that Europe doesn't really, have to hold back on importing, but we do. And the theory has been that Europe needs it more than we do. But Ambassador Prakash, I want to delve on the first part of what External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar said. I mean, of course, he went on to talk about how what we import in a month is as much as what Europe imports in an afternoon, and that's got all the highlight. But he starts by saying, we will do it our way. Has that message now gone across that India is in no way saying that it condones the horrific massacre in Bucha, that it's happy with the way Russia has trampled all over Ukraine, that we think it's okay for them to do it, but we will do it our way? Do you think that message has gone across emphatically now?
Well, yes and no. I think in the higher echelons of the US establishment, that is understood, especially in the diplomatic circles, in the Pentagon, they understand. But a majority of the senators, the congressmen, the others, perhaps either do not understand or choose not to understand, because US as a major power has a sense of entitlement, and not just vis-a-vis India, vis-a-vis every country. What is good for the US is good for the world. You remember the spokesperson had said once that Americans getting vaccinated is good for the world. So that is the kind of attitude. So where you do not see things from the prism of the other side. But therefore this meeting has been very timely, very important, in that Prime Minister spoke about the situation in Ukraine upfront, categorically condemning what had happened in Bucha, and the Indian side seems to have pointed out that, look, we also have national interests, and that we will be guided by our national interests. So it will take time for the US to register that fact, because I would dare say that US has not dealt with a country of the size of India, which is a close friend, not an ally. And, when the Secretary of Defense tells India that it is not in India's interest to have defense relations with Russia, it is something that we find very unusual. Granted, we are a very small country. We are just a country of 1.4 billion people. But we so happens that we know what is in our national interest. So to be told that you little brown boys, let me tell you what is good for you, is something which is not done. And it is in the interest of both the countries that we treat each other with respect and agree where we can and agree to disagree where we cannot.
Absolutely. But, having said that, beyond the rhetoric, Ambassador Prakash, and those sentiments are very well placed, what do you think India will do? I mean, there was already a Newswire report today saying that one of India's OMCs may have cut back on some purchases of Russian crude. Will we maybe hold back from creating this alternate mechanism to SWIFT? Because yes, we've put the message across that, you can't tell us what to do. But there is a line, right, which we
Absolutely.
will not want to cross.
No, let me be upfront. The relationship with the US is very important for us. It is the most important relationship. We have invested a lot in that. I am a strong advocate of this relationship. And granted, there is nothing called absolute strategic autonomy. You have to make adjustments, just as we had stopped or reduced our oil imports from Iran. But here is the situation where the oil imports is concerned. There is no embargo. There is no sanction. Uh, Only now the US has banned the import of oil into US. So given the circumstances, we are very much within, we are at liberty to to buy oil. So therefore, the hand wringing by the US or certain quarters thereof is not cannot be understood. What they have done now is that said, all right, it's a grand concession being made. All right, buy 1 to 2%, but do not buy more. And so, I mean, we'll have to, we'll have to make choices.
Yeah.
Some choices will be difficult, but we'll have to make it. But when it comes to supreme national interest, I think we will draw a line.
Sure.
And that is the message we are giving.
But the real story though is not the oil, is it? It's the weapons, it's the defense systems. Chidanand, there seems to be, or they seemed to be, if I'm reading between the lines, and do tell me if this is correct or not, that now a realization within diplomatic circles in the United States as well, that if we're going to wean away India from Russian defense supplies, we need to step in and become that alternative. Because I mean, we're still highly dependent. 60 to 70% of our defense supplies are coming in from Russia. We need them to keep maintaining what we've already bought. So do you think that that is now becoming clear, that the US will also have to take 2 steps forward to make this happen?
Yeah, absolutely. And they have said they will. The question, there are two issues here. One is, of course, even without your salutary or salutary US advice to wean off Russia, India has been doing it for some time. I mean, India's defense purchases are now far more widespread. We buy from France, we buy from Israel, we buy from the US. And that's smart. I mean, no country should be dependent on any one country for anything, for that matter, not just defense. And secondly, the US stepping in, the big sort of boondoggle here is the cost, and the process. US is it's a private defense industry, but they are also bound by a lot of regulations. A lot of things has to go to Congress, and I don't think the Indians are comfortable dealing with it. I had past experience of not just India, but even many other countries. I mean, Pakistan and its F-16 saga is one example of how difficult it is, to navigate the system. I did notice, though, that Defense Secretary Lloyd, I think, referred to ways of getting around. I think cost is a big issue. US platforms are very expensive. And US is definitely looking forward. They want to sell. They're dying to sell. India is a big market, and they'll be only too happy to have their systems, with India, not necessarily because of winning it away, even as an open market. So all that is in the works. But I do see India being smart enough to diversify its defense purchases, which has been happening for some years now. And not just that, also indigenizing, which is a major drive in India. So, I mean, this is just a process. It'll take, it's not something that can happen overnight or 1 or 2 years.
Sure.
Can I come in? Can I come in here for a second?
Yes, please, Ambassador Prakash.
For us, given our very serious security concerns, the right to choose is very important.
Yeah.
We cannot depend on one person. And as Chidu very rightly said, the US defense industry is private. Even if the defense secretary wants them to shave their pencil, unless there is competition and US goes by competition, we will not get the right price, the right quality, the right technology. And then what about joint development and joint production? Raksha Mantri ji spoke about joint development and joint production, but so far there is no response. So for us, what will perhaps happen is that we will be very careful in getting new weapon defense platforms from Russia. But reading between the lines, what I see is that so far what we have done, the contracts that have been concluded, they are okay. I hope that S-400 deal will not get into any trouble, because that will have serious impact on the relationship.
This is now going to be a tricky terrain to navigate, isn't it, Ambassador Prakash? How do you expect this to pan out over the next few weeks, as Russia seems to be only intensifying its assault in Ukraine? There seems to be no end in sight over there. I mean, the best situation for us would be that there is a ceasefire very quickly and, we move on from this, but that doesn't seem to be happening. So what are the sort of risks to this entire situation going forward, Ambassador Prakash?
I wish I have a direct line with President Putin and I can advise him as I advise the world. But the point really is that Russia is in a fix. Russian progress has been stalled. Today, the West is not willing to give them a face saver. 15 days ago, before Bucha, perhaps there was a possibility. But today, the West is intent to bring Russia to the knees. And in fact, what is unsaid is even in a regime change in Russia. So I think the quickest way for Russia would be to declare a ceasefire and pull out. It is going to be diminished. It has been diminished. The sanctions will not go. The global criticism will not go. But the longer Russia continues, I think the losses are mounting. The international condemnation is mounting. And it is complicating things for Russia. I do not see Russia being able to win or achieve their objectives in Ukraine because the combined West is pitted against Russia, and the way arms and armaments are being pumped into Ukraine will continue, and they will scale up their even offensive weapons will be provided. So, if possible, I know that President Putin is not going to give up easily, but that seems to be the quickest way out.
So, Chidanand, a lot of think pieces doing the rounds nowadays and seeming to suggest that maybe India needs to recalibrate its positions as well. Yes, Russia has been a very, long-standing ally and has been there for India in tough times, etc. But the world is changing. We are forging new partnerships and maybe we need to pivot as well. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing it even without, gratuitous advice from, the commentariat. The fact is, Indian defense purchases from Russia have been actually, been dialed down over the last several years. Like I said, we buy now from Israel. Israel is a major supplier. France is a major supplier, and we have previously bought from the British and Americans are now stepping in. So yeah, we have been diversifying for some years now. Look, I think it's an acknowledged principle that every country will act in its self-interest. And one of the highlights actually to me this visit was the fairly strong stand India took that it will act in its self-defense no matter what the US says. The fact is President Biden actually staked his personal time and prestige to try and nudge India. Usually, defense ministers and foreign ministers set the stage for a high-level summit. And in this case, President Biden decided to personally intervene ahead of the 2+2 to try and talk to Prime Minister Modi. And I don't think he managed to nudge, India very much on the whole Russia-Ukraine thing. I think India was fairly assertive that it will take a nuanced stand. It can't join the US-NATO line of, outright condemnation. But there was a subtle, critical look at Russia's actions. So I think India struck a very, sort of subtle and nuanced line on this, and I think they came out with their heads held high.
Yep.
This country has a lot of backbone, and it's by no means a pushover.
Absolutely, but it's going to be more and more difficult to navigate the situation as it evolves because Russia's atrocities are becoming clearer and clearer, and we're also a country with great
and the Indians have condemned it. Prime Minister Modi unilaterally actually brought up Bucha, and also the fact that in many conversations, in many statements at the UN in India. India has been subtly critical of Russia. The idea that somehow, India is neutral, fence-sitting, I don't think that's correct, true at all.
Yeah. The key takeaway is we will do it our way. Well, on that note, thank you so much to both of you for joining us on the show this evening.
Thank you.